Hello, my name is Valdis Lenisars and I'm a Principal Inspector with SafeWork New South Wales. Today I have with me Jacob Morris from our SafeWork New South Wales engineering team. Today's webinar aims to provide you with an overview of silo safety and take you through the steps needed to complete a self-assessment checklist of your silo. Throughout this webinar we will be referring to PCBUs, which is an acronym for Persons Conducting a Business or Undertaking. The checklist is for PCBUs such as farmers, self-employed people, controllers and owners of workplaces and plant who have responsibilities under the Work Health and Safety legislation. You can use the checklist to assess how effectively you are managing safety, review procedures to determine corrective measures, consult with workers about hazards and risks, and purchase or assess a new container, make changes to the workplace or plan a new facility. Farmers and workers are killed or seriously injured every year while working on or inside silos. The three biggest reasons are falls from heights, being overcome by oxygen depleting fumes in confined spaces, and people getting dragged into augers. Recently, a young worker was tragically and permanently injured after working near an unguarded auger.
This webinar will cover the following areas to assist you in completing your own self-assessment of your silo: site selection, preparation and installation, emergency planning, signs displayed on each container and equipment, training, ladders, access to top hatched and falls from heights, access to container interior, confined space hazards and risks of entrapment in grain or other substances, fire and explosion risk, electrical safety, bulk handling, plant and equipment for loading and unloading, personal protective equipment, inspection and maintenance. I will also provide links to additional resources to supplement the information provided today, such as the self-assessment checklist. However, please note that the webinar does not claim to be a comprehensive statement of a PCBU's responsibilities. So let's get started.
One of the most important aspects of silo safety starts at the beginning, the planning stage. Evaluation of the proposed location of the container, plant, equipment is crucial. You need to consider the factors of adequacy of the location, such as can the surface support the loads and is the drainage adequate to prevent flooding and subsidence. You need to ensure that you have reviewed and implemented the manufacturer's instructions, such as foundation installation, loading and unloading rates, and are the proposed stored substances within the manufacturer's specifications. Another vital consideration you need to take into account is in relation to safe vehicle access. Is there safe vehicle access to and from public roads, and are there measures in place to prevent unauthorised access? These initial planning considerations are important to get right to ensure you pick the most appropriate location for your silo.
In the event of an emergency on a farm, you need to have emergency procedures in place and ensure that they are well developed and communicated to all workers, including contractors. Do you have measures in place to rescue trapped workers from silos and adequate fall arrest systems? Are there detectors for heat, smoke and fire installed where required? Do you have adequate firefighting equipment and emergency equipment on hand? For properties that have several silos, a site map outlining the location of silos and identifying them by name or number can be beneficial to have in the event of an incident where emergency services need to access your farm. An area that needs to be incorporated into emergency planning is isolation, lockout and emergency procedures for ancillary plant such as augers and conveyors. Adequate emergency planning and training in the plans will assist you and your workers in implementing your emergency plan during an emergency.
Now, let's look at what safety signage you need on site. You need to identify any area that requires signage and display the appropriate sign warning of the hazards and outlining the procedures. Have you identified confined spaces? Are there warning signs at openings, such as hatches? Do you have signs at appropriate places to prevent unauthorised entry? Are allowable loads on conveyors and augers displayed? Have you considered signs warning of outward opening hatches and streaming substances? Hostile working environments can deteriorate your signage. A good work practice is to include inspection of your signs in your inspection and maintenance program to ensure they are still readable and placed in the most appropriate location.
Workers need to be provided with adequate information, instruction and training in all tasks and hazards on site. Ensure all relevant training needs have been identified and developed working procedures where required. Do you provide your workers training in the safe use of tools and equipment, emergency procedures, first aid, injury and incident reporting? Have you developed training in fall arrest systems and in the care, use, storage and maintenance of personal protective equipment? Do you have adequately trained workers in confined space entry and retrieval? Do you keep a register of training that highlights the date and type of training that was undertaken? A training register can assist you in determining the training needs of your workers and track when refresher training is required.
Falls from silos, windmills, buildings and machinery during maintenance and harvest are among the main causes of death and injury on farms. 30 people have died on Australian farms in the last decade from falling from heights. You only get one chance, so always be safe working at heights. Ensure there are no risks of persons falling from a height, both inside and outside containers. Make sure you can't fall to begin with. Always work on the ground whenever you can. Make sure your silo has ground level working devices fitted. These could include augers to lift the product from the ground or truck level up to and into the silo, an extension rod to open and close the top hatch of your silo from ground level, drone technology to conduct any high-level visual inspections. Safety cages and platforms around your silo ladder can help reduce the risk of a serious fall. If there is no other option other than using a portable ladder, make sure it is on firm, stable, level ground, is secured at the top and bottom to prevent slipping, is positioned so that the base is 1 metre away from the supporting structure for every 4 metres of height and allows for 3 points of contact when ascending and descending. Do you have fall protection systems in place, such as guard railings and safety cages? Are suitably rated attachment points available for fall arrest devices and rescue devices? If you can't use fall protection device, you must use a positioning or fall arrest system, such as harnesses and lifelines and secure anchor points. Check the condition of your fall protection equipment regularly. Replace any old and weather equipment used to prevent falls, such as guardrails and harnesses. Make sure your ladders are in good working order. Warning signs advising workers of the need for fall protection is required and a good reminder to make sure they are working safely at heights and with the correct equipment. It is essential that access to ladders and elevated areas have been made inaccessible to unauthorised people, including children.
Let's now move on to confined space hazards and the risks of entrapment. You should only enter a confined space as a last resort. First, consider all other ways the job can be completed without entering the confined space. If you must enter, understand the space you are entering, both before and during the work being performed. Only skilled, competent persons who have completed the confined space training and have the right equipment can enter a confined space. You should have a signage on any access areas to confined spaces to warn against entry. For additional safety, all access openings to confined spaces should be locked or bolted shut to prevent unauthorised access, including children. Discuss the potential risks and methods of work with all workers before anyone enters the space. Agree on any emergency procedures with workers before work commences. Develop a rescue plan for each confined space and make sure you have rescue equipment, including breathing apparatus, available. Make sure a competent person checks any lifelines, winches or harnesses to be used are in good working order. Always have a trained safety person located outside of the silo with adequate communication into the confined space. Oxygen can be easily displaced by other gases during work in a confined space, such as a combustion engine producing carbon monoxide or fumigation. Monitor the air inside the confined space with a calibrated gas detector to make sure the environment is safe to enter and remains safe while any work is being completed. Never enter a confined space to rescue someone unless you have been trained and have the correct equipment. Has the potential for entrapment by the stored substance been identified? Eliminate the possibility of being engulfed while working in the silo by isolating the product, not stepping on the product, or using a harness and lanyard tethered to a secure strong point outside of the silo to avoid being engulfed. As mentioned earlier, you must have systems in place to prevent unauthorised access to the confined space, including children and visitors to the farm. Confined space entry is considered a hazardous work area, and you must have rigorous controls and procedures in place and ensure your workers are trained and adhere to the control measures you have put in place.
Fire and explosion pose a significant risk on your farm. Identification of fire and explosion risks for the container contents, associated plant and any gases that may be generated is required. Identifying, assessing and controlling the risks associated with dust, gas, fire and explosions will help eliminate incidents such as gas dust explosion on a farm. Factors you need to consider in the control of fire and explosion on your farm include: if the stored substance is likely to produce toxic or flammable gas, have the risks been controlled? Are dust, fire and dust explosion hazards controlled? For example, is a dust cloud generated and visible during loading or unloading? Have hazardous areas been classified for explosive dusts? Have hazardous areas been identified for flammable atmospheres? Have potential ignition sources been identified and controlled? Is protection and separation of electrical equipment adequate? Is the moisture content of the stored substance regularly checked to ensure it is within specification? Is ventilation of the work areas necessary? Has the policy of not fighting fires been adopted and workers informed? And are appropriate warning signs in place?
Electrical safety is paramount on your farm. Electrical risks are risks of death or shock or other injuries such as falls from ladders, burns, collapse and unconsciousness. Examine the location of overhead power lines, the distance from them, and the electrically powered equipment and leads. Have you determined the voltage of the overhead power lines and the safe working distances from the overhead power lines? A PCBU must eliminate electrical hazards or, if that is not reasonably practicable, to minimise the risks so far as reasonably practicable. The following factors will assist you in this. If poles are used to break crusted grain, are distances from power lines safe? Do travel routes of trucks and augers avoid low power lines? Are augers always lowered when moved or towed? Have residual current devices, RCDs, been fitted to all power outlets? Is regular inspection of electrical equipment and leads carried out? And have any underground surfaces been identified prior to disturbing the ground, such as digging, excavating, ploughing or staking?
Let's now discuss bulk handling plant and equipment for loading and unloading. An estimated 60 people are seriously injured each year on Australian farms using grain augers. In 2014, a worker was killed after his leg was dragged into an auger. Once again, you need to identify, assess and control the risks of using plant and equipment on your farm. The following are areas you will need to address. Are moving parts of augers or other conveyors adequately guarded to prevent human contact, including children? Does the auger have a correctly fitted flight intake guard and an emergency stop switch located near the flight? Is guarding installed and maintained over the auger chutes and sweep channels within the silo? Are moving parts, including belts, pulleys and chain sprocket drive arrangements guarded? Are there isolation and lockout and tag-out procedures in place to ensure that the machinery is shut off and isolated prior to adjustment, service, unblocking or cleaning of the machinery? Are guards always replaced after maintenance and clearing blockages? Are there operating procedures for equipment and plant in place, and have workers been trained in the operating procedures? Are there systems in place for movement of augers that take into account overhead power lines? Augers should always be lowered if design allows when being moved. If the auger can't be lowered, move via an alternate pathway from the power lines. Is suitable personal protective equipment such as hearing protection, dust masks and safety boots provided and worn when operating augers? Where the plant is powered via power takeoff or PTO from a tractor or similar, is there a system of work in place to ensure that the PTO driveline guards are in place? A large proportion of machinery incidents can be attributed to inadequate guarding, removal of guards or poorly maintained guards. Ensure you communicate the importance of machine guarding to all your workers and take note yourself.
You must provide suitable and sufficient personal protective equipment, also known as PPE, for yourself and all workers. Check that suppliers provide you with personal protective equipment that conforms to appropriate Australian standards to ensure that it is effective. Identify tasks that require PPE and incorporate the requirement to wear PPE in safe work procedures and ensure all workers are trained in the correct use of the PPE. We have now come to the final area of discussion, inspection and maintenance. One of the most important aspects of your safety system on site is to regularly examine and maintain plant and equipment. A good system requires you to have in place inspection procedures which outline frequency of inspection and maintenance and ensure that it is in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations or guidelines. Here are some examples of inspection and maintenance you should consider for your farm. Have you undertaken an inspection of footings, foundations, slabs and exposed plinths for settlement? All access points such as ladders, stairs and handrails for corrosion and integrity, hatches, latches and control mechanisms, safety device attachments, safety lines, harnesses and anchor points for integrity, containers, particularly for bulging, electrical equipment, leads and cables for damage, and filling devices, unloading devices, discharge equipment such as augers and conveyors for adequate guarding. A successful inspection and maintenance program also incorporates good record keeping to ensure you are adhering to the schedule you have put in place. We have now covered off the 11 areas contained in the self-assessment checklist. Safe use of silos, augers, field bins and chaser bins on farms. You can get a copy of the checklist by visiting the SafeWork New South Wales website, which also offers extensive up-to-date information, resources, codes of practice, checklists, safety webinars and videos to help PCBUs in undertaking their duties and obligations.
The self-assessment checklist is a great resource that assists you in monitoring, compliance and safety of your silo and associated equipment.
SafeWork New South Wales will be rolling out a statewide silo safety program in 2020. This webinar forms part of that program. There will also be an additional 3 video safety alerts for silos that address the 3 biggest silo safety risks, which are falls from heights, being overcome by oxygen depleting fumes in confined spaces, and people getting dragged into augers. SafeWork New South Wales inspectors will be conducting site visits as part of the silo safety program. You may receive a call from a SafeWork New South Wales inspector to arrange a site visit to your farm.
You can also request a site visit to your farm to discuss silo safety by contacting SafeWork New South Wales. Thank you very much for watching.